Hey, so today we have a unique opportunity with a Muslim student, a conversation with Ian. He's a Muslim from Penn State University, and he was so open to the gospel. We talked about things like the attributes of God, who is Jesus, and also the historical accuracy of the Bible. And as you'll see, his heart and mind are open, wanting to search through things, and so it's so encouraging to see God working in people's hearts and minds. So I hope you enjoy. Cool. All right. So first question, what's your name, man?
Ayan.
Ayan. Kevin, nice to meet you. All right. So the question of the day is, what percentage of people are good? How would you answer that question?
I would say I'm torn between 50 to 75, like on the upper end.
Okay, so upper end. And the most popular answer we've seen even at Penn State is 75%. So a lot of people say that. But what do you define as good?
People will say that good is just like, oh, what you think is the best. But you can apply that. There's a lot of figures throughout the history that thought they were doing what's best for their country, but it wasn't necessarily actually the best thing.
Yeah. That's a good point.
I talk about morality with not even just intention, because there's some objectiveness and subjectiveness to that. But I feel like a majority of people do have good thoughts in their mind, and they have moral thoughts in their minds. I feel like there's a small majority of people that are lost in society, essentially. Because I'm a big believer in something like prison reform. Okay. Because I believe that everyone does get a second chance, especially to rehabilitation.
I've had a lot more than second chances myself. So
yeah, of course. I feel like people deserve additional chances, especially if they're willing to go that extra mile to make themselves better. Yeah. So that's why I feel like I'd like to amend my answer. I feel like it's at least 75% of people are good people. Okay. Because I know there are a lot of people that, if given the chance, they would love to rehabilitate themselves.
Yeah. And I think you made a point of like there's subjectivity, but there's also some level of objectivity. Because if we just intend to do something good, but it's inherently bad or hurtful to someone, I don't think we can call that good.
Yeah, and even then, that itself has more nuances, especially like the trolley problem. That itself, like, okay, running over one person or two people, there's nuance between those two answers.
Yeah, and that's where like intentions are important, but also the action and the result of it are also important too. But then there's different people.
Go higher.
All right, thanks. It's all good. But there's like different people that have different opinions of what is good, right? Yeah. And so at that point, like, can humans actually determine what is good and bad? Because there's 7 billion opinions. What are your thoughts on that conundrum?
I think that's something that'll never be reached. Okay. Again, you go through different religions, sects, even if you're not religious, just cultures in general. Yeah. Every single person within those cultures have their own beliefs about what's wrong and what's good. Yeah. So I don't think there will ever be a consensus. There could be a slight or overwhelming majority, but I don't think we'll ever get that 100% as to this is good and this is bad.
And you mentioned even like cultures and society, because society can't actually determine what's good and bad, because there's some extreme societies that we would probably categorically agree that it's bad. Like, so for example, like Nazi Germany. Like, we can categorically agree that that was not good what they did, but as a society, they did elect Hitler, and they did know that he segregated at minimum. And so we can't really say, oh, well, this society thinks it's good, so therefore it's good. And government can't determine what's good because they change their mind every 4 years, and there's a lot of different views in other countries on that too. And so you mentioned like religion aspect. With this conundrum of human society and government not being able to determine what's good, I would actually argue that there has to be some level of higher power that determines good and evil. What are your thoughts personally about a God being involved in this question?
I mean, I'm Muslim, so I do believe that there are some guidelines in Islam, or even with the Abrahamic religions, that do guide morality. But I think that atheists, people that don't believe in religion, can also be moral without believing that religion. Because personally, I think if a religion is the only reason why you're a good person, you're not a good person. If you need the promise of a heaven or hell to be a good person, then I don't really think that you actually believe in being a good person. Okay. So
because it's almost like then you have an agenda and like you're just being controlled. You're not naturally being good.
And that's why I personally, there's a lot of atheists that share the exact same beliefs as me, and I respect them more. I mean, I'm not saying that I only believe in being a good person because of my religion, but I tend to respect atheists more for having my same beliefs because they, at the end of the day, they think after the dead they're gone. That this life is just all they have. And they're still doing everything they can to give charity and be inclusive to every member in the community. Yeah. So again, I don't disagree with saying that a high power can guide morality, but I definitely don't agree that that is the only reason why we have morality.
And it's interesting coming from a Muslim background, like, do you believe Allah ultimately has the final say on Judgment Day, if you will, or what's your thoughts on that?
Essentially, yeah, but there's a little more nuance to it. I mean, I'm still learning.
Okay.
I wasn't entirely the most religious growing up. I'm starting to get more now, and I'm learning more about my own religion, but from what I understand, it's not essentially just like you live your life and then at the end it's just like you're either written off or you're getting sent to heaven. There's a lot of forgiveness involved. And it's not just if you've sinned a couple times in your life. Like there's no original sin essentially in Islam.
Yeah.
I think it's until you're of age, so puberty, your sins don't count. But even then, the sins that do count, there's most of them aren't weighing you down a ton. So I don't know, that's where I'm coming from.
That's helpful. And the Quran, I've read the Quran actually, the whole thing, and very interesting. But it does talk about that at the end of life, that our deeds are weighed on a scale, like the good and the bad. And basically the idea is that like good needs to outweigh the bad. That's how Allah does it. But at the same time, you mentioned like mercy and forgiveness.
Yeah, exactly.
Allah, it's often known as like one of his 99 names is mercy,
merciful,
right? And so there's merciful nature of Allah in your faith. And so, but then it's like, what percentage would you say Allah, how would Allah answer this? Based on your current knowledge of the faith, how would Allah answer of what percentage of people are good?
I think that they would respond probably 100%.
Okay, that's interesting.
Especially because, I mean, I believe it's a Christian belief that we are made in the image of the Lord, and that we are made to be good people. Some people can be led astray, and even some people could just be born messed up. They could have been, it could be mental, chemical. It could also just be, as soon as they were born into a village that didn't raise them right. But even then, I feel like being such a merciful deity, Allah themselves would attribute everyone as good.
Yeah, which is interesting because Allah is also known as holy, like perfect in all of his ways in the religion. And it's interesting because when we look at humanity, there's almost a different scale from the Muslim perspective that, well, you need to try to be good enough for Allah. But in some ways, and I've talked to many Muslims, that they say we can't be perfect.
Oh, yeah,
and
definitely.
so that's why there's mercy. But then what's interesting and different about the Muslim religion and the Christian religion, because there's some similarities of law and the Abrahamic roots and all things like that, is the nature of Allah, of the God of Islam and the God of the Bible, is one of the 99 names of Allah. They don't include two things that the Bible attributes to God, which is love and justice. That the Bible is very clear that God is love and that he is just. That's not one of the names of Allah. There's times where in the Quran it talks about that, like he enacted justice, but he by very nature isn't just. And so what's challenging and is how can Allah allow us into his presence when there is no justice for our wrongdoings, our sin, if you will. And so any thoughts on how you deal with that, or how the Muslim faith deals with that, of like this concept of justice?
I just want to confirm, so you're saying that one of his names, so his names don't include love or justice.
Correct, yeah.
So it's not promise. Is that what you're trying to get at? It's not promise. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll take you for your word, because again,
and you can check it yourself.
Oh yeah, for sure. Because I understand this is what you do, so you probably know a lot more than I do.
And I'm not trying to like lord over things. I'm just trying to clarify differences, if you will.
Yeah, no. At least from how I grew up and how I've interacted with other Muslims, I mean, we do believe that he has love and he is just towards all of us. Again, that's just one of the difficulties with faith. Faith, I mean, in itself is being trustworthy in the unknown. So there's I don't know. I can say, oh, I'm a good person, I'm going to heaven. I'm a bad person, I'm going to hell. But I really don't know until that day of judgment. So it's one of those things you just gotta trust. But it's not just you trust and you let everything be. It's not the same thing like there's a shooting, thoughts and prayers. You make changes and you force yourself to be a better person and to help better society. But at the end of the day, you have no idea what's going to happen.
Yeah, it's like an active trust and faith.
Exactly.
So if there was a chair that I was going to sit on, if I trust that that chair is going to hold me, a true trust is going to make me act on it and sit on that chair.
Exactly.
And so
if it has a broken leg, you're not going to look at it, okay, I trust it's not going to break. You're going to look at it and be like, okay, that's probably going to break.
And so that's why it's important, though, in that analogy, taking it one further, is you need to know the chair before you trust them. You may not know everything that will happen, because one day, or there's a lot of different chairs that could break. But say all the religions are 10 different chairs, you need to find the chair that is not going to break. You need to find the chair that is true. And so maybe to clarify your statement of like faith is part of it, but the Greek word in the Bible for faith, it's like pistis. It's this word based on evidence, like to know. And so we don't know everything about God. We never will on this side of heaven, I believe. But we know enough to trust him. And that's where, when we look at all the world religions in the world, we do have to look at what those world religions say of who God is, because that's the chair that we're sitting down on. That's what we're putting our eternal destiny in hold of. Do you see the importance of that? And in the Quran, it talks about sacrifice and blood sacrifice, and even in the Old Testament, and it's okay if you don't know this, but real quick, it's important, is that in the Old Testament, which is confirmed by the Quran that this is scripture and things like that, it says without blood there is no forgiveness. And so we can't be forgiven without a justice of without the justice of a sacrifice. And in the Muslim beliefs, there's some sacrifices that are done at some of the correct. But there's no sacrifice for our sins. It's all just relying on the mercy of God. But according to the scriptures of both the Quran, which confirms the Bible, and the Bible itself, it talks about the need for justice. And the second thing is love, is that love is something that if it's truly unconditional love, it's not going to be like conditional of, if you follow me, then I love you. But it's this agape love, this unconditional love. Islam doesn't have unconditional love. It's just do this and maybe Allah will have mercy, that's the faith and religion. But with Christianity, God showed his love for us, that he died in our place because we are on the path to hell. We deserve to be judged out of his justice, but out of his love, Jesus came and died in our place. Jesus is God. And that's a differing view with Islam. They believe he's just a prophet, not God. But the only way God could reveal his love and justice was to come and die in our place, so that you and I don't have to act good enough to become like God, but rather God died in our place, taking the wrath of God. And it's not through death, not through our doing something, but it's through Christ dying for us, and then he rose again, proving that he's God, and then he can forgive sins. And so the big difference between Christianity and Islam is Islam says you need to do this, because Allah is not love and just, but the God of the Bible says you can't do it. I'll do it for you, and he'll show you his love and justice. And so if you consider just that love and justice, even as you read the Quran and as you go to the mosque, you're going to see that that's missing in the message, in the nature of God. Have you heard that before?
A little bit,
yeah. What, do you go to the mosque nearby?
I do. I do try to go as much as I can.
Yeah, so I actually was there, and I actually did an interview with the president of the mosque. And I was there during Ramadan a couple times, and so I have some friends there. They're really nice people there, which is cool. And I think it's important just to acknowledge the differences of that. So based on your current view, who would you say Jesus is? Because I know you're on your journey of learning.
I believe he was a prophet in Islam.
Have you ever read what in Arabic they call it the Injil, the story of Jesus?
It was when I was young. It was a few years ago.
And so what I would encourage you, if nothing else from today, is read the Injil, because you're going to see that Jesus very clearly claims to be God. Whether you believe it or not, that's another thing, but it's very crystal clear. And the Quran talks about the book that was written, and it talks about a ton of times in the Quran. The book that was written is the message of Jesus. And so even the Quran corroborates the story of Jesus. So as you even study the Quran, you also need to study the Injil to understand even the Quran in full. And so really going back to this as well, I know you said around 75%. It is 0%, but because God is holy, and you believe Allah is holy too, he can't allow immorality in his presence. So, for example, if I have a bottle of water that's unopened, it's clean, you would probably drink it. But if I told you that there was one drop of poison in it that would kill you, you're not going to drink it, right?
No.
And so in that way, like if I go to paradise heaven in my current state, I would be corrupting the presence of God in a way. And so that's why, just even logically as we proceed, that if God is holy and just, then none of us are good, but he has to do something about it. And I can't make up for what I've done. I can only receive what is given to me through Jesus. And so really the difference is Jesus is the big difference between Islam and Christianity, of how we view Jesus, not only who he is, but what he did. So does that make sense?
Yeah, I see where you're coming from. For me personally, like how you said, if you were to go up in your current state, you would be tainting heaven essentially. Yeah. But I don't believe that we would go up in our current state.
Okay. Yeah. So tell me how that works from your view.
Yeah. So of course you're of course familiar with the story of like Adam and Eve.
Yeah.
So that whole ordeal and the tree, the apple tree, to get sent down. But so we are in a world full of humanly and worldly desires and worldly sins as well. But let's say we meet that benchmark to go up where God is forgiving and says that like you deserve to go to heaven. I don't think that we would go up with all these humanly and worldly desires and these sinful ideologies. So I don't think that like, oh, if I were to go up as myself, I don't think you would carry all of your earthly desires with you.
And I think the big question though is, how does that change happen? Because I agree with you. Because even in like my view, like we are transformed. We're given new bodies, if you will. But in your view, how are we transformed? What does that look like?
For me, that's the thing. I don't really view religion as a tangible, like divine intervention thing. I mean, again, maybe I'm going against Islam with this again.
I want to hear your personal view.
I'm still learning. I'm a big believer in science as well, and I believe that there are a lot of things that happen throughout history where they could have been supernatural, they could have been, but we attributed them to something that we could understand because they were beyond their comprehension. You go back to something as silly as the Loch Ness Monster. Yeah. Something happened to make someone believe that there was a Loch Ness Monster.
And then it was the game of telephone where it made it bigger than it was maybe.
Not even a game of telephone. It's really just, if we see something we can't understand, humans by nature are scared of that. We are afraid of the unknown. And I believe that even if all the Abrahamic religions are really just a personification of things that have cosmic energies around our universe, I don't know, personally, I feel like a lot of the stories that were told in the Abrahamic books, Torah, Quran, the Bible, I feel like they could be personifications they could be fables, they could be personifications to teach us and give us lessons. But I don't think it's really just like, okay, like there's this tangible thing that's going to happen when we transform from earth to heaven.
Okay.
So I really don't, like I'm not going to...
You're almost like leaving it up to mystery.
Exactly.
You don't know, okay.
I think because honestly, I mean, maybe this would upset, like if, let's say, a Muslim that's watching or like a Christian that's watching this. I honestly don't really care about what happens with the afterlife.
Okay.
I care about being the best person I possibly can here on earth. And if I'm culturally a Muslim, and I'm of course I'm learning more about Islam as days pass on, and so I align myself with Islamic beliefs. But I'm just gonna keep being myself and keeping the best person I possibly can to help out as many people as I can. And if that lands me in the afterlife, then so be it.
Sure. Do you believe? Because you mentioned like the different religions and different personifications. Do you believe at the end of life there is one absolute truth about God, like regarding God, there is one absolute truth?
I think if there is a God and it's one single God, not I'll get into that. But if there is one God, then I believe there would be an absolute truth.
Okay.
But I know, like again, this is like fictional. But going back to like, have you read Percy Jackson? Have you heard of that?
I've heard of it and I've heard the concept. I haven't read it myself.
So they have all the Greek gods, and there's also a spin-off series where they focus on the Roman mythology, except they were both in the same exact universe, and it was found out, and it was revealed that the Roman gods and the Greek gods, they actually were the same exact beings, but they were split across personalities, essentially two different cultures. And so again, this is more, not even a conspiracy, this is really just like a thing that I thought about.
It's okay.
It could be Abrahamic religions or other religions out there operate in that way as well, where we personify a single or like multiple deities in different ways. But at the end of the day, they all come from one same energy.
Okay.
So again, that was just a thought I had. That's not
It's
something
okay.
concrete.
And that is
Yeah.
very popular these days. That what you're talking about, because even like you look at the Marvel and like the
Yeah.
the the multiverse and things like that, like it in our culture, it's pushing this idea that everything is one and we're all one energy or one
Yeah.
personification of a piece of the deity. But if you look even at it logically, all the world religions, and even this concept of the multiverse and the Percy Jackson stuff, because I've heard that
Yeah.
before, the claims that are made by each of those philosophies, including Percy Jackson, it can't coexist with the other religions, because at some level, each religion claims an exclusive truth.
Yeah.
Hinduism has many gods and Islam has one God, but they're
Yeah.
both claiming that there's absolutely many gods or absolutely one
Yeah.
God. And same with Christianity, that it's very clearly claiming that Jesus is God.
Okay.
And so if we step away from like what we feel could be right, logically they can't all be true. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
no, I understand
Okay.
that, but I also think about the fact that, of course, religion has been around for centuries.
Millennium, yes.
Yeah, sorry, that would be more
Even
accurate.
longer, yeah.
Yeah, especially when, again, I can't speak, maybe I'm a little biased, but
It's okay.
especially the Quran itself has been, I mean, we're still encouraged, not even encouraged, more so, we have to learn it in the original Arabic, not modern Arabic,
Yes,
original Arabic.
I've heard that.
But I understand that the Bible and the Torah, or actually no, not the Torah, but the Bible has gone through many translations. It's also a much older book than the Quran because the different, I guess, renditions as corruption unfolds. I don't entirely trust, I don't entirely trust the specific words that have been passed down over the millennium because they could very well have been appended or edited based on whatever the climate was at the time. Because you know there have been crusades and wars fought in the name of almost every religion.
There's a lot of evil things done in the name of God and religion.
Yeah, exactly.
I agree.
And I personally, I don't believe that there should be any religiously affiliated state because of the fact that once you mix religion with politics, it becomes very uninclusive and very divisive. And I think that is also root for a lot of corruption in the world. So I honestly, I don't trust humans very much when it comes to spirituality, especially when it comes to admitting it, or I don't know if that's right. But
And I agree with you that we have to have some level of healthy skepticism because we shouldn't just believe what we're told. And unfortunately, even in the American society, which I'm most familiar, I've been to a lot of countries, but like a lot of people, even in Christendom, they're told like, oh, just believe in Jesus because I told you so. I think there's some danger to it.
It's not healthy.
We need to know why we believe in Jesus, and there are answers. You mentioned the Bible. I want to touch on that real quick.
Yeah.
It is an old book, and there are things that are corrupted in history. There's institutional and political corruptions that has happened. So I'm not disparaging that. But if you look at the history in an unbiased way as much as possible, you look at the hard evidence. For example, manuscripts. Are you familiar with the idea of manuscripts, like copies of the originals? Not the original, but copies. If you look at like the original copies, there's over 5,800 manuscripts of the New Testament in Greek. Which, okay, that sounds great, but when we look at that time, Aristotle, Socrates, Plato, which, we might be skeptical, but we're not questioning the veracity, the truth of them.
Yeah.
They were earlier than the Bible, and we only have between 5 and 20 of those manuscripts. So between 5 and 20, we never question those documents. But then if we look at the Bible, there's over 5,800 manuscripts, and as early as 30 to 50 years after Jesus. And so that's massive evidence. And you can look it up too. Like, I'm not gonna
for sure.
go into depth because we don't want to put people to sleep. But the evidence that we have of lack of corruption is everywhere. There are evidences of corruption, but nothing that actually stood the test of time. Like once the Roman Empire got politically Christian, there was some bad decisions and things made. Because like you said, I agree. Politics, humans, and religion, it's messy.
Yeah.
I do believe one day like God will reign and that will be good, but he's not human. So humans love to take and use religion for power. And that's not godly. So this idea that the Bible's been corrupted, there is actually no evidence that there was any significant corruption of the message. Yes, there was articles and, this one said 72, but 99% of the others say 70. Okay, that's fine, but that doesn't change the message. See what I mean? So if you're going to make a claim that the Bible's been corrupted, you have to have evidence. Because I would say on the contrary, there's more evidence that the Bible is true than corrupted. Does that make sense? At least
No, I understand. I'll definitely look into that.
Yeah, it's an interesting stuff. And I'm not like a scholar where I know everything, but I know enough where I'm like, I can be confident in this. Because I don't want to just believe Jesus because I feel like it. Because feelings are fleeting.
And I respect that.
And so, and you should even look at even the origin of the Quran. I would say in a lot of ways there was no written copies with Muhammad, which is fine. It's an oral text. But the earliest manuscripts we have are actually a couple hundred years after. And there was a time where there was a disagreement and they burned all of the manuscripts except one. And that's an interesting story. So you should check into it.
I have heard about that.
And it's like, that should lead to some healthy skepticism at minimum. And if you go into the details, I would say it actually creates a little more. So that's why I encourage you, study the origins of Scripture, the origins of Quran. It's fascinating. And so this idea of like the Quran, and have you read the Hadiths at all? Are you
I have. Especially growing up, because I was in Sunday school, I did have to
learn a
go
lot
through.
of them.
And again, my memory's hazy now, but I have definitely touched on a lot of them.
Yeah, and what's another difference maybe with Islam and Christianity that I want to like maybe get into is that Allah is holy. Like he's set apart, and Muslims very much respect Allah, and I understand why, and I respect that. But would you say that we can actually know Allah? Like that, is he a relational being? What are your thoughts on that?
I guess so. So how would let's just I want to get some context.
So
how would you answer that? Let's say with your Christian God.
So I'll maybe start with. I don't believe that in most world religions, not just Islam, that we can actually know God. That there's this separation. But what's different about Christianity and God himself is that the knowability of God. It doesn't mean we can know everything about him. I'm not boasting that I understand everything of God. But the fact that God came down to the earth to live as humans is spoken about in no other religion. There's Greek mythology that Zeus came down and things like that, but never fully incarnate as a human being birthed by a woman type thing. And so to me, one of the big differences is that we can actually know God in relationship with him. There's still a holiness gap, a separation that only can be bridged by Jesus, that through Jesus we can have access to God. And unless you had a different explanation or a different view, that's a big difference between Christianity and the rest of the world is the knowability of God. Does that make sense? Or what are your thoughts on that specifically?
Personally, for me, I feel like a religion, especially when you have such a powerful deity, makes more sense when you can't get personal with your deity.
Okay.
Because at the end of the day, they're supposed to be again, going back to how I believe that it could, a lot of the stories that were told could be fables and not actually, part of the Red Sea, water to wine. I feel like it doesn't make sense to be able to personally get to know God and people to live among a God in the Abrahamic religions.
And that is fair because we see even like in the Bible, I don't know if it's exactly in the Quran, but Moses on Mount Sinai, like God was like throwing down lightning bolts and thunder, and people couldn't even touch the mountain because of the holiness of God. What I'm saying is not lowering the holiness of God or the separation of God, but actually he lowered himself in our space, in our world, so that we can know him. God is still so transcendent and holy and separate from us, but he wants us to know him. And there's this assurance that he wants us and loves us. And so if God shows us from afar, like, oh, I love you, it doesn't really mean much. If I say I love my wife, but I never serve her, I never spend time with her, I'm just a bunch of talk. You see what I mean? And so God didn't lower himself of reducing his holiness, but he lowered himself to incarnate and to spend time in us, with us as a body. Like he became human flesh so that we can know him. So his love drew him to be like us so that we can know him. It's not lowering the holiness, because I understand your rationalization of like, how could we know God when he's the creator of the world?
That's not even where I'm coming from.
Okay.
I'm not saying that it lowers his holiness. I feel like it doesn't make sense for what the elements of what God is supposed to be, for a God to come down and not even talking about how he humbled himself into Jesus, how he could help serve humanity. I don't know how to articulate into words, but it just doesn't make sense in my mind for a God to. I feel like a God shouldn't have this pattern of divine intervention where they come down and they start meddling with human affairs. I feel like it should be an oversight body that we report to and is responsible for the order of the universe.
Sure.
But shouldn't be something that comes and meddles with the universe.
And that's fair. But the reality is that there's some things that won't fully make sense to us that we do have to. There is that level of faith that you have a foundation, but you trust.
Yeah.
And God, if there was any other way to save humanity, he wouldn't have done that. Like he would have just said, "Oh, try to be a better person, follow these rules, and try to be kind." And Jesus himself, even when he was on this earth, he's like, Father, if there's any other way, let this cup pass before me. Let this wrath of God pass before me. But there was no other way. And so it may not make sense, but sometimes God's love is so radical and his ways are above our ways that it may not make sense to us. But the overflow of God's love and wisdom is greater than us in some ways.
I mean, even going back to how not everything has to make sense because some things are beyond us.
Sure.
What you're talking about with God coming down in human form to relate to us as humans, that sounds like people trying to make sense of something divine. That sounds like people trying to personify the cosmic power of God to a more humanly definition.
And if he didn't claim to be God, I would totally agree with you. Because a lot of people gravitate to personas, like to people. Like you talk about like big political leaders or business leaders. They essentially worship them in some ways. But Jesus claimed to be God. He backed up his claims with supernatural events that are corroborated outside the Bible even. And most importantly, he rose from the dead.
Well, so what do you mean by outside the Bible? Like what has been corroborated outside the Bible?
Yeah, so like different historical figures like Josephus, Tacitus, and a bunch of other writers that were not Christians, like following Jesus, but they were writing at the time of the Roman Empire, talked about Jesus, this man from Galilee, doing supernatural events. And so there was people outside the area of Israel that were writing about him doing events. And that doesn't necessarily prove it true. Like we don't have video camera evidence. But if it was only in the Bible, that would be less convincing than if there's other things that corroborate it outside as well. And so Jesus, but going back to the point real quick, is the resurrection. That is the cataclysmic event that we center our faith on in Jesus. Because if Jesus stayed dead, like if I died for you, I would stay dead. Because I would deserve to die, and also I'm not God, so I can't raise from the dead. Because people die, they're dead. Jesus conquered what really is our greatest enemy, is death. Because no one wants to die if we're in sound mind.
Yeah.
And Jesus conquered the greatest enemy of death and Satan, if you will, from going back to that story of Adam and Eve. And so Jesus backed up his claim. And so it wasn't they made a persona of Jesus. Jesus claimed it and he backed it up. And that, to me, that shows the difference of, it's not a personification, it's we're following the claims of Jesus that he is God and his evidence. Does that make sense, the difference?
I guess our difference please comes there where I of course need to do some more research on what you've given me. And also just a difference, it comes down to just a difference of opinion where I don't think that that type of divine intervention really exists, and that a lot of the stories that are told could be fables. So that's just a belief that I have. So that's why I'm very reluctant to believe what you're saying. But again, I need to do more research on that.
And that's where, if you're claiming something is false, you need to have evidence.
Yeah.
In the same way, if I claim something is true, I have to have evidence as well. And I'm glad to send any, or if you have any questions in the future of like, hey, I'm studying this, do you have any answers to this? I would love to do it. We're here to help people in their journey for truth. And what I want to steer away from, as I mentioned before, but I want to reiterate, is so many people go based on feelings and what they feel is right. But really, as humans, we need to know what is true. Because if what I'm saying is true, that Jesus is the only way to salvation, and that without us turning to him and us trying to be good, we're destined for judgment and hell. But there's salvation in Jesus. That's a massively important truth that you have to deal with of, do I believe it or not? I can't force you to do anything.
Yeah.
It's between you and God. But I want to help you on the journey of truth to do it. And I've read the Hindu Vedas, I've read the Quran, I've read all these things, and I think it's valuable to do that because I'm confident that there is truth, and that truth is Jesus. But many people don't search for truth. They search for what feels good or what the masses are doing, and that's where it's dangerous. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, yeah, I understand what
All
you're
right.
saying.
Thank you so much for the conversation.
sure.
Really appreciate it.
Yeah.
So this is the Gospel of John. It's the Injil. I like it because there's a simple picture, but basically to reiterate what we talked about, God created us, and it was good. It was very good. We were in a relationship. We sinned. We were separated from God because of his holiness. We try to get to God with religion, with morality, with trying to be a better person. But it's like almost like we're trying to jump to the moon. Okay. You might be a better person than me, but you're jumping 4 feet. I'm only jumping 2. It's a chasm that we can't get to. The only way we can get to God is through Jesus. And then in response to Jesus coming, he'll pick us up. He'll save us. He'll cause us to not only know him, but that we can obey him in a better way through God. And you even said, like, you want to be a better person. Wouldn't it be good to know the God who is perfect to enable you to be good? And so even if you look at it that way, it's interesting. So this is the story of Jesus. So that's this. And then this is just a little bit of like kind of a summary of some of the things we talked about. But
and do you guys have an Instagram or anything?
Yes,
I might hit you guys up after I read
absolutely.
this.
So this is actually our Met on the Street card. We have an Instagram.